Hey everyone, Numedia here, back at you with another Classic TBC video. At the time of posting this video, we're just shy of a couple weeks before BlizzCon starts, where we will hopefully get our first word on Classic's new installment, the Burning Crusade. With the hype building up in anticipation for TBC, which is for many a staple amongst WoW expansions and MMOs in general, TBC's launch, like any WoW expansion that gets released really, will bring with it the bulk of the casual player base of the game, which represents the vast majority of players that play this game. And many of those are going to be older WoW players that fell in love with the game once, but are now tied by the responsibilities of the real world. I feel like Classic Vanilla failed to capture the casual player base that much. Fault of a casual friendly enough PvP system or an interesting enough PvE system, and outside of that, there isn't really much to enjoy about Vanilla really. So today, we're going to answer one simple question. Is Classic TBC going to be casual friendly? Whether you're a casual player that only has a few hours per week to sink into the game, or whether you're currently an active player of the game that wants to go casual for TBC and still get to enjoy the game, we're going to answer this today. Before we start, it's important to consider what a quote casual friendly game really is. What people mean by casual friendly is really how easy is it for a casual player to still progress their character despite having a limited schedule to play the game. To answer that, we're going to touch on three main aspects of the game: raiding and dungeons, PvP, and general things like leveling and gold making. At the end, we're gonna draw a conclusion and decide whether TBC is indeed casual friendly or not. So let's get into it. We're gonna start with raiding and 5-man content. The main change as far as raiding is concerned from vanilla is that raids go down from a size of 40 players to 25 players. This is both a good and a bad news for a casual player. The good news is that there will be theoretically way more guilds to join and way more pug groups forming, giving you a wider array of options to dabble into raiding with. However, raids going from 40 to 25 players means that the individual responsibility of each player is higher. Add to that the fact that raids are mechanically more difficult in TBC compared to vanilla, although it's still a game that came out in 2007, so it really shouldn't be that hard for modern players. Well, it looks like getting invited to raids will be theoretically harder, but also technically easier since there will almost be twice more groups and guilds forming. Let's also talk about attunements, which are in TBC way more present and add a significant barrier to entry for raids. However, and I am guilty of thinking this in the past too, the attunement process really isn't that hard if you're just someone that plays the game casually. Surely, it is technically harder to get attuned to raids in TBC than it is in vanilla, but it is quite simple in general. Consumables. They are far less pervasive and way cheaper to obtain. The consumable list goes down from whatever ridiculously long list it is for your class to just a couple flasks, a stack of food, and a few weapon oils to last you throughout the raid. Also, world buffs. They are no longer a thing in TBC. No longer do you have to spend more time outside the raid preparing for the raid itself and then logging off until the raid starts. This is probably the most hated mechanic of vanilla by both casual and hardcore players. For earlier raids, it wasn't a big deal, but later on, world buffs essentially became a requirement if you didn't want to spend hours in the raids and hundreds of golds and consumables. Remember how I said that what people really mean by casual friendly is really how easy it is to progress their character? Well, raids go from dropping 2 to 3 items for 40 players in vanilla to 4 to 5 items for 25 players in TBC. It's quite common to spend weeks without receiving a single piece of loot in vanilla because of how scarce loot is. It's going to be significantly faster to gear up while raiding in TBC thanks to this. Let's also talk about meme specs. For the most part, you can really play anything you want and you'll be fine in TBC. Rat Paladins are much stronger. Boomkins have their mana issues solved. Shadow Priests are both strong and really useful. Enhancement Shamans are amongst the most needed specs in a raid, and much more that I'm sure I'm forgetting. So, for the most part, if you're a casual player and you don't want to be forced into a spec that you don't want to play, you'll be glad to know that you'll be able to achieve that in TBC. Just play whatever you want and you'll probably be fine. Before we move to PvP, let's talk about dungeons. Dungeons in TBC are amazing to do. They're both a reliable and repeatable casual friendly piece of content to do to get some really good dungeon gear. But they also reward with some good raiding gear eventually, thanks to the Badge of Justice system, which I will talk about more in a minute. And unlike vanilla, where people only do dungeons very early on to get attuned and basically never do them again, in TBC people will be doing dungeons for much longer because they stay relevant throughout the game. So finding a dungeon group or forming one should be significantly easier. Alright, let's talk about PvP. If so far you think that the PvE content was indeed made much more casual friendly, wait to see how much love the PvP content received in TBC. Unlike vanilla, where you have to invest tens of hours of your time to reach any meaningful rewards in PvP, in TBC, PvP rewards you with high-end gear even with casual activities. First, honor is converted into a currency that you receive every time you do anything PvP related, which you can accumulate to buy entry-level blue PvP gear with some resilience on it. If you want to push it further, you can do 10 matches of arena every week. Whether you win or lose, you will always be rewarded with a base amount of arena points at the end of every week, which you can spend on the previous season's gear without requiring you to have any ratings. You can even buy some of the current season's pieces if you want, but most of them require a rating to get. And then, if you're really good at PvP, you can push your rating to get the current season's PvP gear. The first few pieces don't require that much rating really, and they should be easy to get even for a casual team. But that's the beauty of PvP in TBC. Getting rewards is only dependent on your skill and not on how much time you spent farming battlegrounds like in vanilla. You can be a casual player and be very good and have very good team partners and still receive the same rewards as the hardcore players do. Finally, let's talk about some general things for TBC. Number 1, gold is easier to make. Aside from the fact that most professions really excel at making gold, looking at jewel crafting for example, you can also make gold in TBC by just doing dailies, especially later on with the introduction of the Isle of Keldanas. Next, badges of justice. I said I would talk about them earlier. I honestly love badges of justice. I love them so much that I'm thinking about making a video just about them. Blizzard seems to have abandoned this way of reward building currency, and I honestly don't understand why. Back when I was 12 playing TBC, badges of justice were the thing that kept me going. I was doing dungeons every day as a social player with my guildies, and when I accumulated enough badges and spent them on a big piece of gear on the vendor, I felt like I accomplished something big. And that gear is just below 25-man raiding gear in terms of power, with some pieces being equal in terms of power like the Bloodlust Brooch. And on top of that, badges of justice are kept relevant throughout the game because more items are added to the vendors as the patches come out, meaning that you can hoard badges for the next patch and buy a bunch of stuff once the patch drops and be ready to rock as a casual player. Let's talk about crafted gear now. Crafted gear is an easy way to gear your character without ever setting foot in a raid, adding more activities to the list of things you can do as a casual player. Things like the Spellstrike gear, which is a very powerful set for casters, or the Lionheart Executioner, which is a weapon that will last you well into tier 5 content. Finally, leveling. Unfortunately, TBC is the first expansion where it has been made clear that everything that happened in the past is now irrelevant. So just rush through the leveling process to get to Outland to enjoy what Endgame has to offer. This is one aspect where vanilla has the upper hand. You can meaningfully progress your character while leveling in vanilla. You can get some pieces of gear that last you all the way to Nax while leveling, for example. I remember getting Hand of Justice at level 55 in BRD on my warrior, and I'm still using that trinket to this day in Nax for some bosses and literally all the time everywhere else. This doesn't really happen in TBC. There are some quest rewards that are pretty good to have, but for the most part, your pre-raid bis comes from heroic dungeons, which require you to be level 70 to enter. And unlike vanilla, where you can essentially get attuned for every raid before you reach 60, you can't really do that in TBC. Your Karazhan attunement chain starts at level 68, and it is good to grab at that level in case you do the required dungeons between 68 and 70, but for the most part, the leveling process in TBC is just a barrier to cross before getting to 70, which is when the game really starts for you. So, here's the conclusion. To answer the question in the title of this video, Yes, Classic TBC is definitely casual friendly, and more casual friendly than vanilla is in general. However, there are some aspects of the game that make it somewhat less casual friendly, like the attunement process, which is technically a barrier to entry even though it is quite simple to get done, and the fact that raids are more difficult and require less people, which means that raiding is theoretically more difficult to get into and you're gonna have to pull your weight in raids, but at the same time there should be more guilds and groups up for raids given they only require 25 players, giving you more options to choose from. But for literally every other reason mentioned in this video, Classic TBC is definitely more casual friendly than vanilla, and if you have a limited amount of time to play, this game is definitely going to give you a sense of progression while keeping you busy during your limited gaming hours. So that's all I have for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this pop up for you in the future. With that said, whatever you do, remember to have fun, take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Bye for now.